Hello, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Background Information. We're just doing a culture video today, so we'll just get a quick quote and then we'll just go straight into it. As always, the culture is relating only to within the universe of my writing. Doesn't generally tend to have much inspiration from anything outside except just the basics of how the place runs. So I hope you find it interesting though. And what we're talking about this time is education in the veil. So I do always wonder what even brought you into teaching, but I guess considering what you grew up knowing was your father proclaiming himself king of the earth and pissing off both sides, I suppose it's a good thing you're here to ensure no one else gets too big-headed, irritable. Quote from Learning to Love a Demon. Traditionally, education in the Vale belonged to the vampires alone. Though other people would learn on the trade and develop new ideas, only the vampires had access to the total spectrum of education. As time went by and humans began to start learning and becoming teachers and sharing their knowledge for free, the vampires began to crack down and put in place laws about what other beings were allowed to learn and what they were not. The first thing all of them had to learn was that the vampires were in charge of everything and had the God-given right above the humans. Schools were run in secret underground, and servants would be taught never to write their own names so that they would never give away the truth of learning from others. Eventually, though, the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic were taught to everyone in order to get a job. Some vampires were very keen to teach their servants, and so would build schools for the children of their servants to go to. A partially educated servant was worth more money, and so it became a trade to teach them up in their trade and then pass them on. Vampire lords paid for apprentices to learn and learn to be under the control of future masters, but always the more intellectual and diplomatic things were taught for the vampires alone and the occasional demons. Often demons were pulled up to teach too, and yet it was very restrictive all the same, but things would change eventually. Within the 1600s, one of the high-ranked vampires decided enough was enough, although no one is sure which, and the noble circle don't want to talk about who. There was a vote about who was allowed an education and how far. This vampire apparently was very frustrated that they couldn't get decent servants, and they were fed up that their self-published books were not being read. In fact, they decided they would train up everyone to read and write and whatnot, so that they could have an audience. This is probably why the nobles don't speak of it. One of their kind used their own fortune to look after everyone, and they began the first school for all members of the Vale. It was enough to spurn the noble circle to agree at about 83% that they would all agree to look after the problem and set up arrangements for schooling. Originally, the religious orders were very quick to step in and help everything get settled. They were all very eager to join the vampires in setting up a curriculum. For doing so, they were able to set up an education system that opened doors for some and kept others firmly closed, and always with the knowledge of their vampire overlords on hand. With that sorted, things would have stayed that way until the issues with Napoleon, because of the influx in the Vale and the trouble with the werewolves, it became obvious that there needed to be much more opportunity and equality within the education system in the entire Vale. There were quibbles constantly on the matter, and no one seemed happy when the representatives of each schooling system were brought forward and couldn't decide on things either. But the situation was sorted rather quickly when the daughter of the fallen god Baal, Irritable Infinata, appeared in the middle of the meeting and dropped down a collection of prepared demonic books on how to educate every single being. Everyone was stunned. They were aware that if this demon wanted to lose their temper, they could probably destroy the entire noble circle and the Vale itself, but instead they just made it plain and clear that they were fed up of forced ignorance and idiots always turning up that never learnt from the past. This also meant education was free up to university, wherein there would be a grant arranged for each individual, and it would be dealt with her own banking company. Irritable was going to make sure everyone learnt. Everyone had the chance, and in return, she wouldn't destroy everything, eat people's souls, or release her brother or father from their bindings. As no one wanted to experience what the earliest days of the Vale had, it was agreed to. In the Vale, the education system is about the same regarding grading and age. Children begin basic education or nursery at 4 years old. At 5, they begin the introduction to reading, writing, and maths, and then from 6 to 11 they are in primary or elementary education. Then from 11 to 18 they continued into secondary education. At 14 they can pick subjects they wish to specialise in, and at 16 they can choose more study to help guide them into university, go straight into a college system and career path, And some can study part-time and do employment skills and learn to drive and do things like vote, taxing, and of course make sure they're aware of the law. The education system varies per country, and certain areas don't always teach the same things that they're supposed to, but there is always the option to re-educate as well as to change vocations. Everyone can have a grant for education, and education can continue onwards. The cost of university is not too expensive either, roughly about 500 DECA a year, no matter the level of the course. Hope you find that interesting. Thank you for listening.